Jonny, while we're letting other people in and just starting off, can you take us back to when design and creativity sort of first played a role in your life, as far back as you can remember, and just lead us through those sort of stages up to education and stepping into the industry for the first time?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess there's two things, right? And one of them is more conventional, one of them is less conventional. So conventional side being, I went to uni, I went to college, and I got into the industry in a way. And then the other side is what drove me, right? And I think that's an interesting tale. And I'm quite open about it and happy to be quite open about it. But I guess when I was at school, going through school, I was into skateboarding in Leeds and heavily into design then. Loved it, everything about it, the graffiti side, all that stuff. But then I moved down to the Lake District, a little town called Coniston, away from the urban culture of the city centre. And that was a bit of a culture shock. But I wasn't that good academically. I struggled because I was dyslexic. It wasn't really picked up on in the day then. It wasn't really a thing. So academically, I was terrible at it. So I just played up to that, and instead of admitting that I was struggling, I was a clown. So still did really well at art, but I fell into the trap of believing what the teachers were telling me, that I was not going to amount to anything and achieve anything. So, I left school without any qualifications apart from art, and just believed what they were telling me a little bit. So went off the beaten path. I think I did a sixth form course in leisure and tourism, and it was shocking. And I did it for a month, and then just hung around with my mates smoking weed somewhere, and that's kind of like the path I went down, and that kind of unfolded quite a lot. And I started to believe I wasn't going to amount to anything, and really went down the road. I mean, I was still doing design stuff. I was doing flyers for raves and things like that, but I was heavily into the rave scene. So I went down a route of getting really heavy into drugs, and from ecstasy, acid, all that stuff, right into heroin, and I developed a little bit of a problem with that. Until the point where my house actually got raided, and the police came around, and I saw that look on my mum and dad's face, and evaluated that situation, and realized that wasn't for me. And I knew there was something deep down that I wanted to do. So that drove me to then go back to college. So I used to hitchhike all the way to Ulverston, and then get a bus from Ulverston all the way 50 miles down to Lancaster to go to college to do graphic design. And I was driven by the past and what I didn't want to be. So that was kind of a strong feeling. I mean, I think, from right back from the skateboarding era, I've always wanted to break things, push things to the limit. And I think I did that with myself. And then sit in the realization what's good and bad about that, and then try and make some decisions. But I've always been driven enough to kind of take myself into the industry that way. And then I luckily got back over towards the homeland of Leeds, at Leeds Uni, and did a graphic design course at Leeds Metropolitan, which is now Leeds Beckett, and that was a very open design course where you could flux and do whatever you want. And it was great. They really empowered creative thinking. And I think after that point, you left uni with the kind of the ability of creative thought, but then maybe not the tools to get into the industry that is needed. So I think I then struggled to land a job, and I think it was a good year or so before I actually got well, not even a placement. I worked for free for a company, just doing junior design work. Back then, junior design work was mocking up and spray booths and all that stuff. So yeah, it wasn't an easy route in, and I don't think it's much. It hasn't really moved much further on in the way. The barrier to entry is quite high. But I think there's better opportunities when you are in the industry now, and when you do land your first role. But yeah, from there, various different positions, junior, moving right through to where I am now, and the works has given me great opportunities to go from senior designer to digital design director, now to creative director, and flux in various things within it. But, you know, previous to that, doing advertising with Porsche and various other people, agency TK and lots of other places along the way. But yeah, that a lot covered in that.
There's a lot to dissect, which is good.
Yeah,
that's always good, because I'm sometimes conscious that this might be repetitive when we do these events and do that backstory. But I think it's really important to understand who people are now and how that's evolved from different successes or failings or challenges, etc. Going back to when you were sort of told that you won't amount to anything, what's the sort of timelines on that, Jonny? What was a sort of, we're talking about early 90s there, or is that too?
Yeah. So I'd say 92, 93 kind of era. So, you know, that was, it was an accumulation of, you know, academically not going to amount to anything, and then maybe an art teacher who because I didn't fill my sketch pad, which was part of a requirement, didn't matter about talent for some reason. You know, it was about ticking the boxes sometimes at school. So yeah, that kind of, yeah, it set you back, but then, you know, you've got to come to the realization of what you actually want, and that doesn't always come straight away. And I think that's probably really important. Is these things take time to realize, and once you do realize, you've got to then have the stamina and the effort to kind of go after what you need, and don't believe, you know, what people say you can't do. Believe, you know, there's always a desire in there, and you've just got to follow that desire. Yeah,
well, we're about roughly the same age, I would have thought, based on those timelines. And I think for maybe today's generation, where, you know, there's a lot of opportunities to express yourself, and there's a lot of broken down courses so you can do graphics in very specific niches, can't you? Now, I remember when I was at school, all you could do was art. There was no such thing as design. You know, you couldn't do graphics. But was that more of that route of not really being allowed to maybe express yourself as much as you wanted to? The sort of maybe the very strict nature of teaching at those times. You know, if you didn't really go into a trade or a labour sort of type role, then it was deemed as being a bit of a bum and farting about until you do something proper. And then that as a catalyst to then lead you down to a route of just sort of self-destruction in some sort of way.
Yeah, possibly. It wasn't, you know, in that day, the careers advisors that used to come in used to go through that kind of algorithm thing that they had, where they kind of like, you ticked a load of boxes of what you were into, and then they told you could erect scaffolding poles or something like that. I was talking to a friend about that the other day. That's what his outcome was. Is a scaffolding pole erector was his given vocation from that algorithm. I think luckily it's better nowadays, but yeah, I think, yeah, you're right. It just the vocation of being good at art, it just isn't seen as a vocation, and they don't see that there's flux within that to do anything. You know, photography. If you got an eye for creativity, I mean, Einstein said creativity is intelligence having fun, right? So that's it for me. It's a different way. It's a different intelligence, and it just wasn't seen as an intelligence, was it?
No.
Back in the kind of 90s, I think there's so many different things nowadays and opportunities and digital opportunities out there that is seen as a value now, which is great.
I think we still have to always remember that this digital explosion that we live in, that still didn't exist, did it? In all the way up until early 2000s, even way beyond that. And it's quite hard to think that wasn't really that long ago. But what we just come to expect at the end of our fingers is just wasn't there. So it's quite hard for people to maybe grasp, because I sort of remember it being, you did design, or you were a photographer, or you were an artist. There wasn't any of these middle grounds, and none of these niches that you could fit into. Maybe it makes me laugh about what you're just saying there about the careers advisor. Recently listened to a Mickey Flanagan thing, and he says when he was at school, he said he wanted to his careers advisor, he wanted to drive a van, and that was their ultimate ambition, was to drive a white van. And the careers advisor says, no, you're the guy that takes the stuff to the van. You'll never be able to drive the van. Yeah, it's that sort of limiting your expectations, which is really negative when you think about it in hindsight. But at the time, you just nodded and stayed quiet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the main thing, and it probably still exists today, is that the skill isn't everything, right? There's so much beyond it, and there's always an opportunity to get back in and flux at any point. You know, I'm not saying I'm doing it, but at 40, you could change your mind and go down a different route. There should never be a barrier to change just from what other people pigeonhole you to be. So, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And when you come through university at Leeds, that barrier to entry.
Yeah.
And I was speaking to a team last week, and the strategist there was saying that the qualification at university is really just, it's just a figure. It means not a great deal, because she said that first year was spent really understanding the ways of the world. And it gets overused, this sort of phrase and this terminology, but it was more about understanding how an agency or studio works, its inner sort of, politics basically, and how to price work, or how to talk directly to a client or manage a project, all these sorts of things. Were they sort of experiences that you sort of came out of university with that, wide-eyed maybe with these qualifications, and it sort of was, just up against the wall all the time? You didn't really sort of feel like you were getting?
Yeah. I think, you did right. I mean, I never asked anybody what the qualification was, and I see that when I've looked down their CV, I see that they've been to university. Doesn't bother me, because you just jump to portfolios about what they create. So certainly in the design industry, the qualification part is, not necessary. I think certain universities are better than others, and the course I went on certainly wasn't great at arming me with the tools to land my first job. And I think it's a bit like when you're doing, when you're learning to drive, right? You're kind of given all the tools to be able to pass a test. And at the end of it, that's when you actually learn to drive, when you're driving on the road and you're picking up, kind of learning how to do it. I think the universities maybe don't offer enough of the tools that you get only on a driving course to kind of pass the test to get into a job. So, having in design, it was Quark Express when I was but yeah, in design and skills in all them applications, it wasn't something I was armed with when I left uni. So I had to learn that on the job, which puts you on the back foot already. You should be armed with some of them tools going in. So there's no barriers to be able to create through your lack of knowledge of an application. And it might seem a bit mundane of that's not really keeping the creative juices flowing. But if there's no barriers to be able to express yourself through learning that stuff, I think then, that's a big armory to have.
Yeah, do you still see that now, today, when you bring people into the team? Are you responsible for bringing, new stuff in? Do you still see those lack of what you would? I don't know if this is maybe just because we've been doing it for so long, but sort of, I've heard a lot of people recently, and this keeps on coming up. This one thing is that they were never taught the difference between CMYK and RGB, and that sort of, to me, that just is like, that sums it up perfectly. This idea that real basic knowledge doesn't seem to be passed on. It's very much more technical or a sort of software driven thing. But some of the gaps in that learning process, which, bear in mind, it takes quite a lot of years and it's very expensive now. There seem to be quite fundamental things that you'd expect to be told or taught. Do you still see that now? Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, I mean, I definitely still see that that happening. I think they applicate less of the learning of the applications when come out armed with more tools than I had of learning the application, because there's probably a bit more need for the output being digital, going through the applications to produce it, versus me doing typesetting on an old typesetting letterpress machine at Leeds Uni when I was there. I'm not that old, but we did do part of that. But we did do stuff in After Effects when I was at uni and everything like that. But it was kind of like just bits and pieces of everything, and no kind of focused learning. And I think there is practical application, understanding of the commercial world is something that definitely is lacking, and that's something you have to gain. But I do think that there should be more an enforcement of a year work placement within our industry. I think a lot of universities do it, and I think it's great. But I think that should really be. There should be more routes for people and more kind of alignment with universities and local agencies to make sure that there's placement for everybody, so they get that real life experience and practical application of the real world of design.
But that would also help the like the barrier to entry, then, wouldn't it? That would really sort of
break down that experience, because that's it, isn't it? You hit that wall straight away. It's like, how much experience? I mean, we expect juniors to have a year's experience. It's like, it's bonkers, isn't it? It's like, well, they haven't got any experience, so it's like, well, they're gonna, you look at it as a resource problem, don't you? And you kind of like, do we have someone here to nurture them? So I think the bigger the agency, the less that is an issue sometimes, but then the people aren't getting the opportunities to work with some of the more boutique or smaller agencies that maybe are offering them what they need or what their thirst is for design.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit of a shame, but yeah, if they came out of university with a year's experience and everybody did, then it's a whole different game, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that that's sort of become a catalyst for a lot of other things that, sort of junior roles that are being, the job descriptions asked for what, 3 to 4 years, or they're of a salary that's way below that level of experience. And it's sort of trying to sort of join the dots there a lot of the time, trying to think, why is that happening? But it must be, it all seems to be full circle. If you break down one of those things, make it easier to access the sort of, the overflow of people that you can bring into studios will be accessible to a lot of people, wouldn't it? And you could reduce salaries maybe, or at least have salaries that are relevant for that person's experience.
Yeah.
And the sort
I suppose it's easy to blame the education system, isn't it, and say they're not doing it. But I think maybe the creative industry as well should reach out to the universities more and make sure that's available. And I think that there is a blockage where certainly in Leeds, and I was talking to you, just briefly about it before the call, where as a collective of all in Leeds, a group of agencies, I think it's a strong position to be in, to say, like, we offer these internship schemes, and if we're a smaller agency, maybe there's more of a hot desking policy where people can come in, do 2 weeks with us, 2 weeks with another agency, 2 weeks with another, or even just come in and work in the agency and not be on placement, try to, just absorb the culture and maybe ask questions about how to produce something that they're producing for their own course. I think that would be quite a nice thing to be available to people, where they can just use it as a, sit down and absorb the culture, and they're not feeling that they're a drain on the resource, and we're not feeling that we have to sit with them and nurture them. They just get what they want out of it.
Yeah. Before we go on to work, Jonny, could you just touch upon the All In Leeds, just for, obviously, like you say, we were talking about it before, but just for anybody that's with us right now, or anybody that watches it in future, just give us a bit of an overview of what All In Leeds, why it came about, and what it sort of stands for today.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was, I'm trying to remember the year it was, but it was when Leeds City Council were doing a bid to get Channel 4 to their new home in the north of England, and we obviously were up against the Birmingham, Manchester, a few others, and as a collective, the council reached out through Thompson and the LEP to get all the creative industry vested in this and help them with the bid, and we did that by forming a collective of agencies where we all almost signed a petition to be part of this collective group, and then a few of the guys went and did social media templates and posts, and we all posted them out as a wave of creative collectivity to entice Channel 4 to come and say that we're all here, we are here as a unit, and I think then they've obviously said yes, which is great, and we were not going to claim that was all us because the council did a lot of work, but I think it just showed a united force, and I'm sure that was nice for them, and I think they picked up on it in the press a couple of times. But thereafter, I think there's a bigger part to play for All In Leeds. Once we formed that collective, it was just nice, and this is what we were talking about before, where we are up against each other in pitches sometimes in the industry, and we are we are swapping and changing roles between staff members, and there's a bit of a guardedness about that. Don't let people in. They might steal our clients, they might steal our staff, and I think that openness that was within that collective group then just broke them barriers down, and now we kind of we set out some pillars pre-lockdown of you know, there was a creative pillar, there was an education pillar, there was a diversity pillar, because there's lots to tackle in our industry, right? And diversity is a big one. So is education, creativity, just championing creativity, and then there was a sort of more of a business driven thing. And I think basically we took on too many pillars at once, right? And there's kind of a steering group that helped drive that forward with various people outside helping. But now we've kind of cut that down to more just sort of social, not networking events. They are just social events where, you know, we're lucky enough to get sponsors who've, you know, got a captive audience of 250, 300 agency members. Well, not members, 300 agencies. So the members are much greater than that. Who, you know, sponsor the events, and we can put on a free bar. People can come and have a good time and just have a chat, really, and intermingle with the with all the other agencies. And let's not be scared about that. Let's not be worried that people might switch jobs or you know, talk about, you know, collaborating, right? So that's the great thing that's come out of it. I've found that you know, we've started to collaborate as agencies and realised that horses for courses, right? Some guys are better at stuff than we are, and that's you know, we've worked with Intermarketing on some Adidas projects on some launch stuff because we've got a great motion department, but we're not marketing wise set up to maybe work with on the strategy side of launching products for Adidas. So we're all working as that collective, and I think that's what's great to come out of All in Leeds, and it's going to continue just doing the social side and maybe, you know, help with the education side, which we were talking about briefly about internships. What
was that like in the early phase of that? Was there resistance to that concept? Was it met with, you know, with
welcomed? Yeah.
Because I've just because where I'm from in Coventry, I've tried endlessly with councils, with business improvement districts, with their, you know, the RDP here, and there is a resistance to design. I've come to the conclusion that, you know, if I was working in another industry, engineering, science, automotive, which is, you know, a big thing in Coventry's history, then there seems to be a lot of doors that would automatically open with design. It doesn't seem to be on the agenda. So it's very much, there is no real community. There's a hell of a lot of people in the industry working isolated on their own. I wouldn't know who was working in design in Coventry. I've been here for working 22 years in this city. I don't know who is here, what studios are here, what opportunities there are. I think everybody works with clients outside of the city, and it feels like we just get pushed towards Birmingham if we want to, you know, find a creative community or be part of something bigger than just a job, which I think ultimately then leads to bad retention from the university. It leads to bad sort of feeling amongst creative people because the wider economy doesn't sort of thrive. That, you know, like independent shops or bars or that sort of thing that creative people like doesn't seem to be here. But from what I know of Leeds, you know, there is quite a big sort of scene anyway. So it was perfect timing because really the infrastructure was there, you just needed someone to knit it together, or was there, well, hold on a minute, I don't really want to be part of this, and then people started to twig it once somebody took, you know, the lead. Yeah,
so there was no resistance once it started happening. I think you need that catalyst to make that happen, and I think, you know, the Channel 4 thing was the catalyst to make that happen, because without that, then this realization of, well, why have we had these barriers up? I didn't know this person did this in Leeds, and I didn't know you guys did that. And you're a great guy. That we could work together. That wasn't happening, but I think that catalyst with the Channel 4 thing helped that. So if you get together to do social events, just got people talking, and I think then there wasn't any resistance from that point, and everybody just and everybody that turns up to them now kind of treats it like, this is great. I can't believe, you know, I didn't know you were just down the road, and I didn't know you did that, and I didn't know you worked for them. You know, and little people know who we work for. Anyway, we're not been the best at PR over the years, mainly due to locked into heavy NDAs. But I think yeah, nobody, and I think that's probably fairly national, right, in various cities where people don't know who's around the corner doing what, because we're all so insular in getting the job done, and the very nature of the work sometimes, and the churn and the speed of it, you know, doesn't help you look outside.
Yeah, and potentially, like, the way that the industry's gone, the direction it's gone in terms of a lot more freelancers, a lot more collaboration. That seems to be, the buzzwords, aren't they, at the moment? I don't think the word collaboration existed apart from the dictionary when I first started. Nobody really used it. And I very rarely came across a freelancer when I first started. So this idea that even though you probably still will have largest agencies in most big cities, the idea that I think most of them bring in people for specific roles now. Instead of having a full-time illustrator, you'd have somebody, a book of illustrators, and you pick the one best for the job. So that I suppose that from a community perspective really helps, isn't it? Because there's not so much of a rivalry anymore as it used to. Like we talk about stealing clients or employees. Now I'm sure that did happen. I've never experienced it myself, but I'm sure it did happen because it was pretty much an agency did everything, multidisciplinary. It sort of wasn't really the word for it. You did print, a bit of social media, a bit of digital. As it progressed, they all done in-house, but now it seems to be, if we can bring in someone that's great at marketing, that's great at illustration, photography, all these different disciplines. So from something like All in Leeds, it seems to make perfect sense to sort of knit that all under one barrier, under one header, sorry. Yeah. It helps everybody just get to know each other, doesn't it? Ultimately leads to better work and better careers.
It does, and well, the thing you touched on about kind of like the stealing of clients, surely, there's kind of underhand tactics that happen behind closed doors all the time, I'm sure, but this kind of breaks that down, so it's not underhand and it's fair competition. If you win that client that we're both going for, it's because you were better, right? And it's because you've done something that we didn't think of. So I think that's a realization that keeps everybody on the toes, and it's a good thing. It pushes the creative industry forward because, if somebody has beaten you to a picture to the post or taken a client away from you, then it's because you're not performing that client anymore.
Yeah, I think there tends to be sort of just complacency, doesn't it, in that sort of sense. You sort of think you've got the client for life, or someone comes along and sort of pulls your socks up a bit, don't they, for you, which is always a good. That's evolution, isn't it? New agents will come along with new thinking. That's the same for across all business, isn't it? And technology, etc. Moving on to work, Jonny.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by reading like the bio on the website about as a sports fan myself and the sort of federations you work for and from the Olympic and many of the other brands that you work for. Was that the agency's initial, what they set out to do? They put themselves in that niche, and that was, we were a sports driven, I think we're going to be the best within that, or was that just? No,
not at all. No, I mean, Roy, the owner and CEO, started it 32 plus years ago, and he worked for ITV at the time, and it was all set design stuff that he kind of brought in and did that style of kind of design. So very much working with ITV and producing that stuff to then moving into POS for Morrison's and large scale print runs, and then there was a period of time where the works was doing a lot with museums, installations. So it's still, I guess you could argue that's still experiential, right? That's a brand experience sort of thing. But I think there was we had a workshop where the guys produced made all the kind of wood framework for a lot of the installations and stuff. And I don't know what year it really happened, and it was probably around the time that we were talking about it before, but it was probably in the really early 90s where I think it was an opportunity to work with UEFA on some bits, and then from there was an in to help with some early Champions League stuff, and it was when the Champions League had a very much different approach to finals identities to they do now, whereas now they kind of have a logo type and a little bit of a different visual language that sits behind the main identity. But then they'd completely flux that identity. They'd keep the main logo, but they'd have like a unique kind of finals identity. It was back to Barcelona was one of the first ones. And I think from that, because of the way the sports industry is, I think then when we started doing UEFA Champions League stuff, right, there's a whole wealth of sports federations then that want to tap into the guys that are working with UEFA, because they were the new kids on the block, the ones that were getting big sponsorship money. So I think that then spread. So I think, from that point, it very much became our niche and almost monopolized the way the the business, the way the work came into the business. So I think, since then, I think it's been very sports driven, and we flux and do other stuff. I think the motion department probably has the most flexibility to go into other markets, whereas the design is more on the license federation side, or has been certainly for the last 20 years. But I think, we have got other routes and other avenues now, which is great. But I think, if that answers your question, I think, it's been a long road and wasn't always where we were.
Yeah, it's amazing how many times I speak to people that have been, or agencies that have been going for quite some time, and how that evolution, it makes sort of sense, but it's always surprising, because you sort of see what you see today. If it's the first time you've been introduced to someone or something, you sort of think, well, they must have just set out to be the best in sports, and that's where they're at now. And it's always amazing, really. Even people that were maybe weren't even getting into design, they were doing something else, and it just trickled from there, and it led to. And I think it's a great sort of story for people, especially younger people getting into creative arts. Just sort of enjoy the ride more than just sort of over worrying about it.
I mean, there's a danger of being typecast, right, as well. And there's always the fear of being typecast, because I think, you can design. A good designer can design for anything, right? I think, it's not specific to sport. There's trappings that come with sport that, you need to have a knowledge of it, what you're doing and where it's being applied, and what story you're trying to tell in what environment. But I think you can apply that logic to most things. And I think, we've kind of come to a realization of the last 2 years that, we should embrace the fact that who we've worked for and what we're doing, and that we are sports niche. There's lots of room to flux within sport itself. We could be working with rights holder one minute, and we could be working with apparel guys the next. It's all within sport, or broadcasters. Most recently with the launch of a broadcast brand out in Saudi Arabia, for the equivalent to Sky Sports out in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. That's a whole different niche, but within sport, right? So there's loads of places to go in wherever you're in. So don't be in fear of being typecast, I don't think.
Yeah, I think it's one of those industries that have really embraced the idea of design and the power of combining the two. They're both quite high energy sort of disciplines, aren't they? Obviously sport is in a different sort of is implemented in a different way. But say like something like, say, Sky, especially from the Premier League's perspective, how they took that and ran with it. And there's been a recent programme about it, and they've dropped in some commentary about the marketing team and some of the things that they did. But in today's world, it sort of really, it seems to have merged perfectly, the digital and the motion, the animation, with what we were speaking earlier, weren't we, about some of the things that I take for granted, basically. I watch a sport and you've got like maybe the leaderboard pops up on the, watching the golf recently, on many, when the Olympics has been on the Euros, even just having the score in the top corner and it moves around a little bit, but you just take it for granted because we've just become accustomed to it. I've been really interested in that from a process, from your perspective, and how every single thing is considered, everything has to tie in, obviously, with the overarching brand, and just how you then start to plan something as vast as that. And really, I don't suppose there is one way of categorising how you guys approach a project.
No.
Because it would be so vast, wouldn't it? But just all of those little nuances within a project, which a lot of us probably aren't that accustomed to unless you work within an agency like Works. How does that sort of manifest itself?
Well, like you said, every single one is different, right? So, the event-driven identities are very different than we're doing a broadcast title sequence, or conceiving a trophy for an event, which is equally a very vital part of a brand in sport, right? It's the champion, it's the thing they hold at the end. So being involved in some of them have been great experiences because they have, that longevity. And I guess as an approach, we always kind of formulate, create, implement, and then assess it afterwards and make sure it's going to work, and then keep on assessing it because these things start 3-4 years down the line before the event. But you've always got to have in mind that these are throwaway brand identities. That they haven't got the longevity. You know, they're not going to last for the test of time, but or they should maybe do, but only in the intangible world. So what we try to build is legacy, because, you know, you think back to, Lance Wyman's Mexico brand identity, and it's just there, isn't it? Because, you know, probably because it was so strong graphically, you know, that we always get the ability to do that stuff. But I think that legacy, it has got to be part of it, and I suppose it's got to be loud and shouty, because it's only going to last a small period of time. So I guess when, you know, we start the process, we know that there's two parts of it. The emblem is usually a pitch process for sort of large things like World Cups, if we're going to go into like the event side, and we would pitch for that. We don't always win that, and sometimes inherit that from, say, like in Brazil, where it was like a competition, a youth competition, where they designed the logo themselves, and then it got inherited, and we just freshened it up and then created the visual identity behind it. But then you kind of you're just assessing the kind of process along the way. Is it going to work? So there's kind of more of an engineering factor to that part of the design. Like there is in any brand, we've got to create guidelines and work with it. And then there's the kind of brand volume part to that. So where is that brand dialed up to 10, and where is that brand dialed down to 1? So the thing you mentioned with the TV graphics is usually later down the line, after we've kind of been through a tender process to win the visual identity, we will go through another tender process maybe to win the on-screen identity. But we stand ourselves in a good place because we've conceived the identity that we can boil it down to 1. And like you say, creating the score clock and the like lower thirds and the full frame graphics is all something that we do, and I think it's really important, because it is that brand volume 1, and it's not the easiest thing to always get right, to still contain brand in its smallest environment. And I think that holds itself on web design as well. But I think, you know, ultimately, it was the thing I was talking to you about before. I think when you come to an event, it's about the journey, and what we're creating essentially is wallpaper sometimes. Apart from a title sequence, which is not, that's trying to get your attention. This is not trying to grab your attention. This is trying to make you feel like you're in a brand environment. So I think that's one of the hardest things to get right, because you're in a big space, and you've got to be aware of that space as you're approaching. You know, when you get off the train, what do you see? Does it build up as you get towards it? And usually we try to do that kind of build up as you go through the concourse. And then when you enter the bowl, what we call this, inside the stadium, the bowl, you've got this sense of occasion, and it's kind of like, it's everywhere, it's in your face. So it could be a little bit quieter leading up to that. So like there's a bit of a magnitude of that, and then fluxing from that, like how is a fan zone different to the feeling that you get from when you enter the stadium? Is it a little bit more carnival like, and is that a little bit more illustrative and party atmosphere? So they're the kind of thought processes that sit alongside the event identity, you know, but that's a journey and a story, and that's the same with the title sequence. You apply that same logic. You try to tell that brand story. So that what's important to get right at the very beginning of all of these is the DNA, and what is at the root of all that, what feeds our thought process. So some of the stuff that we've done with UEFA and women's football recently, UEFA have got you know, a strategy judgment that's out in the public, that, you know, it's striving to empower women's football and build it and make it better. And then they've come to us to kind of realize that visually. So that's where you've got to find the DNA, because the DNA is the genetic makeup of how it looks. And you know, that you can change your hairstyle, you can change your clothes, and there's lots of stuff that you can do within a brand to flux and change and see how that the outward look is. But you've always got the same DNA, right? So the DNA is the thing that's that red thread that sits through everything, and hopefully, you know, when it's out there, we've got some bits out there with the Women's Champions League, but there's more to come on Women's Euros and other stuff. That's all fed by the DNA and and what that means. So I think that's the key to it all, is getting that DNA right. And once you've got the DNA, that should feed all of your answers, and then it's about application, and that's where I go back to. It's more engineering. It's an engineering side of design, because it's about applying it in a way that suits the needs of the brand.
Yeah, it's also, you have to remember that Works is much more than just a design agency or a brand, you know, from an experience perspective. When you talk there about how you feel getting off a train or going in the bowl or at the fan zone, that's much more than just the creative, isn't it, and the visual. It's just that emotive sort of side. It's about everything that a sports event should be, really, and it's trying to sort of make that experience the best it can be for any given client or any given competition. But what I always think with what you guys do and the sort of line of work is about, it's the ultimate example of consistency. So it's about making sure that is reflected wherever you go, wherever you look, every time you read something, every time you view something. Because I was just thinking then when you're talking, I was thinking about those opening credits or a leaderboard or something. And and I suppose this is a perfect reason, this is how it should be engaged with. But for me, if you're, like, say with the Euros, for instance, and you realise your team's lost on penalties, you just quickly look and you throw the remote down and walk off in a huff. You know, you don't there and sort of absorb it and go, oh, those titles are perfectly curved and beautifully laid out. It's there as a thing for us to interact with as viewers, isn't it? And if it doesn't do that, then it's, you know, the job hasn't been done perfectly, has it? So it's
100%. Yeah. I mean, I always think, like, it's always challenging to get that consistency, and I think that's where a lot of the planning goes in, and not from us, it equally from the clients and the federations that we work with on that side of stuff. It's so hard to get consistency in a brand as it is, right? When any brand, that's the epitome of good brand identities is consistency. At a base level, you know, like I say, you can change your hair and change your clothes later down the line and do other stuff with the brand, but you know, that base level. But because it has got that shelf life, that small window of when it's going to be in the public eye, consistency is 100% key, and not easy to implement, especially for our clients. You know, they've got thousands of rights holders using them identities or parts of that identity. So, you know, guidelines are key, but, you know, as we all know in the industry, nobody uses guidelines. And you know, they might look and look at a logo and look at a bit of identity. So we like to champion ourselves as kind of brand ambassadors. So we try to get people to flow stuff through us, and almost we help depending on the size of the federation, we help do some of that brand policing. Because it's key. But like you said, the interesting thing is, you know, it's like any brand, right? It lives and dies with the product. If the product fails, then the identity fails with it. So, you know, if the football's rubbish and it was a rubbish tournament for your team, then you probably won't have that legacy that I was talking about of, you know, that was a great event and you remember all the colours and all the stuff that's out with it. You know, the same as if you pick up a hair straightener and it breaks straight away, you think it's a crap product. And you associate that brand there with that product. We don't maybe get the association of that with the sport, but yeah, you know, it lives and dies with what happens in the event. We're just the wallpaper around it. We're just a consistent element and quite often it's all audience driven, right? So it's all, you know, people at the event is a consideration. People watching it on screen, eyes are a consideration. Where we place the name is a consideration of where the camera gantry is in the bowl, because then that's got camera pickup. We're looking at all the camera pickup because that's the vast majority of audience. Loads of considerations all the way along the line with it. Yeah.
Do you think there's a possibility, this might have already happened, that it's become overly engineered, that we just expect things to be perfectly positioned every single time, to expect to see endless messaging because there's so much noise out there, you just have to force it down people's throats? Because that concept of legacy, I still, even though I was probably too young to remember it minute by minute, I sort of still look very fondly, like Italianity.
Right, yeah.
Because not 96 as well, but 96 may be a bit different, but Italianity was sort of quite basic in its thing. It just had a very iconic sort of mascot, didn't it? That squared off sort of football player, and he's still got a T-shirt with that on, and still love to look at it. Or is that just
can you get Rubik's cube, didn't he?
Or is that just maybe me, just looking back, wishing I was 8 years old or whatever it was again? Or is it, is today, are we not sort of looking, where that it's always that next step? It always seems to be, especially in the sports world, where you can drag out as much revenue out of everything and monetize every single aspect of it. Is that just the way we've got to deal with it now, or is it getting to a point where it has to be too perfect?
Yeah, I think there is, and it's a hard thing that we try to manage a little bit. There is a danger of over egging it and kind of gilding the lily, in a sense of applying too much. But I think the emphasis on brand environments is greater because you've got to hold people's attention more than you kind of ever did before. Now, there's the different argument that you were saying there with there's kind of like the monetary side of it. So there's kind of getting it in front of people, but then the trappings of that is everybody's in competition to grab people's eyeballs. So everybody's doing it. So you've got to do it in a more thoughtful way. And it isn't always throwing a logo or a bit of text in front of people. It is doing the wallpaper well. It's making you feel the sense of occasion. And I think, back to Lance Wyman again, if you look on Lance Wyman's site and the stuff that he did for Mexico in the Olympics, there was an extensive rollout there. There was an extensive thinking about like how that brand could expand into different environments. And I didn't think that was present back then, but it was. I think you maybe had to attend the event to maybe know whether it came to life or not. But yeah, it's interesting. Certainly that the exposure of the brand has gone up loads, and I think that's due to application. We've got streaming services and everything where you absorb that brand, versus when we were watching Italia, in Mexico '86. The TV graphics that were in place there and the title sequences weren't very rich. They didn't kind of draw you in. They didn't need to be as attention grabbing. You had 3 channels, right? So you were going to watch them. So they didn't have to be as immersive because the attention spans were greater because there wasn't as much going on in the digital world that you would dual screening. There wasn't dual screening. You're not on a phone and a TV at the same time. So
the thing is about those sort of events are that they, however far we go down the line with it, it's always going to be that momentous sort of 4-year occasion, isn't it, for most of these events, especially in the football world, unless Arsene Wenger has his way. You still got like that. If you want to be brave, like the London, whatever your personal opinion about these things are, it's irrelevant for this conversation. But the idea that if you want to be brave and just create something that is a talking point, which in itself creates a lot of momentum and marketing. Always looking at you. Or even the Brazil one, I remember seeing that and thinking, not having too much of an opinion on it. And then I read about it and understood about the sort of the mountains and the landscape and how that made much more sense. And that gave it a lot of a sense of geography and where it's being held. Those sort of things are always going to be sort of pinnacles if you're into that sport or that type of event. But however much you get bombarded with it, you're going to enjoy it and love it anyway, aren't you? You can turn certain things off, can't you? You don't have to look at it 24/7 if you don't want to, but it's always going to be like these momentous occasions in that calendar of that sport or that that discipline that you just think it's just a celebration, isn't it? And that's really, I suppose, really important, aren't you?
Like you mentioned, the story of the brand identity is lost on the people consuming it quite often. It's not present. Maybe not so with the UEFA thing I mentioned, because that is a brand with longevity. The Champions League and women's football in general is something that's going to live on, versus creating something for Brazil and the story behind that, because quite often there's a process where we're working with FIFA and a local organising committee, and it's a political stance for them, and right, the world's watching them, so it's really important that they want to communicate their story, even if that end product doesn't communicate that story to everybody watching it, because there's the press releases around that identity at the beginning. You know, Wolf Olin suffered it with the 2012 Olympic stuff. You know, that got slammed. I still love that identity, and never had a problem with it. It was a bit of a what's all that about, but at the same time, you know, there was a method behind it, and that was evident in the final output. When you got to that event, you'd forgotten all about that kind of controversy around the icon. But I think, yeah, back to where I was going, I think the kind of the stories are created and with FIFA and the LFC, because it's such it's you know, potentially politically motivated of how you shout to the rest of the world that, you know, this is what we're about and this is who we are. So, you know, LFC is quite often kind of looking at the future of their country and what their country's got to offer now, and they want to convey that. And then, you know, there's the tourism aspect to it, so it's got to almost be a literal interpretation of Brazil to the wider world, of like that summarizes that. So them colorways in Brazil, like, you know, that carnival colorway, you know, that yellows and blues and greens with splashes of pink and stuff, you know, conjures up something, and then kind of like even down to that kind of like brand volume 1 stuff. Them colours are emotive, and they play a part. But yeah, it is the consumption of that idea is not evident to people, and it doesn't necessarily need to be.
But I always find it quite funny and fascinating that the idea, like you just said then about Brazil, is that pick upon those sort of 3 core colours, because it's culturally and stereotypically it's what we imagine is what that place is like, say with China or Russia or England, and it ultimately it always boils down, you know, a Brazil Olympics or World Cup in 100 years will probably still be based around that core principle, and it's then just sort of someone else's interpretation of how that should be, you know, implemented. I find it quite, you know, it's endlessly fascinating. I've just noticed the time, that's nearly an hour.
All right.
Already, Johnny. That's I think we could go on for at least another couple of hours, just nattering. Again, when you're really interested in the work that somebody produces, it seems quite seamless to talk about it.
Yeah.
But conscious about taking up everybody's whole Friday. So I'm sure you've got many more things you need to be doing. I really appreciate that, Johnny. It's like I say, I feel like we cut that short, but you know, we'll have to arrange a second viewing.
Absolutely, yeah.
For anybody that's interested in seeing more about Works and the work that you do, what's the best place for them to find you online?
Well, behind me is a good plug, actually, because we're just currently developing the website, and to do some cool interactive WebGL stuff, hopefully with various sports, and hopefully you'll, you know, better play with the ball and move it around and do some fun stuff. So the website's a good place. It doesn't give you a full summary of who we are. We've got loads of things going on that, like we say, we're strapped by NDA, so we can't talk about them. But yeah, go to our website. We're getting better at social. When we got the time, we're going to do more on that. But yeah, check us out, talk to us, send us a message. We'll happily we're welcoming northern folk that will talk to anyone. I
think it's a fascinating thing, your website, where you've got stuff that we talked about then about, I'd say, the credits for the I can't remember what the event was. There's a lot of, I think it's about a horse eventing graphic that I've seen.
Yeah.
But it shows over like the leaderboard, and it shows that animation, that digital sort of side. Then underneath that is a link to a project where it's the trophy for the under-19s. And I think that, again, that's something else that would be amazing to talk about in more detail. But it shows the breadth of what. Well,
yeah, it's all brand, right? So I think, you know, the trophy is the centre of most sporting events. So to get brand identity and story into that gives you loads to go on. Let's promote for the federation. Let's promote for the tournament, and you know, content and good fun for us to do, right? It's great to design something with that longevity and legacy that is a trophy. We've done quite a few of them, but yeah, if feel free to organise another one. We can talk trophies and on-screen identities for, you know, Saudi Arabia, which is, you know, whole other massive thing really that we're on with at the moment. So
that's what we were just saying at the start, before we came live, was that idea of cultural differences that you have to take into consideration. I think that would be like with the Saudi thing, and we say about different countries and even the basics like colours, how they represent and mean different things.
Yeah.
And I always remember when the London Olympics, the trophy, it was made in Coventry, so it was a big deal for us. And there's one on display locally. And that, again, that's a fascinating thing. I think before that, I just took that as, they just got it made at Timpson's or something. It was like getting a key cut. It was just this off the shelf sort of type thing. Now, what goes into that, and the technology and the design is fascinating.
So much fun to be able to design trophies, just conceiving them and making sure it's had a story. Like I say, it's not always evident to the person looking at the end, but the journey in creating and knowing there's story and brand in there, that knowledge of knowing that's in there is enough. But yeah, so some great stuff. And like you said, the cultural differences, working with Arabian typography, right to left and stuff is challenging, and we're working with guys out in Jordan to develop some brilliant typefaces that we think look amazing, just graphically look wonderful. But yeah, there's some challenges ahead with that in itself. So.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people that are really interested in maybe moving into different territories and expanding past the UK, and they can still be based here like yourself, but work elsewhere, and it's quite a leap, isn't it? And to know where to guide that is always be a really fascinating insight into that whole process, not just the creating and the output, but just the step by step how that happens. And the communication and the difference in hours and all those sorts of things. It's really interesting to know. So we'll definitely be in touch and get something else arranged. But I really appreciate today, Jonny.
No worries.
Hope you have a great week.